you have seen the images. Even if you have never stood inside a cave in southern France or northern Spain, you have seen them. The charging bison, the hand outlines pressed against stone. The horses running in a line so fluid they look like they are still moving. You probably filed them away somewhere in your mind under primitive art or early humans or things that happened a very long time ago and do not have much to do with you. That filing was a mistake. Because when researchers began to understand what was actually happening inside those caves, what they found was not primitive. It was not simple. And it had everything to do with you. The real reason ancient humans painted on cave walls reaches into the deepest parts of what your brain does every single night. It touches the way your nervous system processes fear. It connects to the exact same impulse that makes you pull out your phone when something overwhelming happens and you need to make sense of it. The images are not decorations. They never were. The oldest known cave art was not made in Europe. In 2021, a team of researchers led by Maxime Aubert at Griffith University in Australia published findings about a cave painting on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. The image depicted a hunting scene, multiple human-like figures pursuing a large pig and a dwarf buffalo. The painting was at least 43,900 years old, possibly older. This pushed the known origin of figurative art, art that represents real things in the world, back further than anyone had previously believed. And it raised a question that has been driving archaeologists and cognitive scientists ever since. Why then? Why did humans suddenly start doing this? Because they did not always do it. For most of human evolutionary history, there was no cave art. Homo sapiens had existed for roughly 200,000 years before the oldest known paintings appeared. 200,000 years of modern human brains, modern human hands, modern human intelligence, and no cave art. And then, in a relatively short window of evolutionary time, it exploded. Something changed. The most popular explanation for most of the 20th century was what researchers now call the hunting magic hypothesis. The idea was straightforward. Ancient humans painted animals because they wanted to control them. The painting was a ritual act, a way of symbolically capturing prey before a hunt, of exercising power over the animal through representation. It fit a familiar narrative about early humans as purely practical beings, focused entirely on survival, doing things only when they served an immediate material purpose. The problem is the evidence does not support it. Jean Klotz, one of the world's leading experts on Paleolithic cave art, spent decades studying the paintings at sites including Chauvet in France, which contains some of the oldest and most sophisticated cave art ever discovered. What Klotz found consistently undermined the hunting magic theory. Many of the most frequently painted animals were not the animals most frequently eaten. Woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, mammoths, these appear again and again on cave walls, but their bones rarely show up in the refuse piles near human settlements. The animals humans ate most often, reindeer and horses, appear in cave art too, but they are not uniquely dominant. If the paintings were purely about hunting magic, you would expect the reverse pattern. Something else was going on. A more compelling explanation began to emerge from cognitive science and neuroscience in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Researchers including David Lewis Williams at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa proposed what is now called the neuropsychological model of cave art. Lewis Williams argued that the key to understanding the paintings lies not in what ancient humans wanted to catch, but in what their brains were doing in states of altered consciousness. In every human culture ever studied, across every continent and every era, humans enter altered states of consciousness. Through trance, through ritual fasting, through the use of psychoactive substances, through rhythmic drumming, through extreme fear, through fever, through sleep deprivation. And in those altered states, the human brain reliably produces a specific sequence of visual experiences. They begin with geometric patterns, grids, dots, spirals, zigzags, nested curves. Then the patterns begin to take on meaning, to transform into recognizable objects. Animals, humans, hybrid figures that are partly human and partly animal. These are called entoptic phenomena. They are not hallucinations in the loose popular sense. They are the brain's own visual system generating images from the inside rather than receiving them from the outside. And they are universal. A person in trance in ancient Sulawesi would have seen the same geometric entry sequences as a person in trance in ancient France, because they share the same nervous system, because they are both human. Lewis Williams argued that the cave paintings are records of those visions, not fantasies, not decorations, records. The ancient humans who made them were documenting what they saw when they entered the most intense altered states available to them, and they were placing those records on the walls of the deepest, darkest, most acoustically resonant chambers they could find. Chambers where the rock itself seemed to vibrate when they sang or drummed. Think about what this means. The most remote images, the ones placed in the most inaccessible chambers, the ones that required ancient humans to crawl hundreds of meters through the dark with only fire for light, those are not the images of casual decoration. They are the images of profound experience. Someone felt something so enormous, so real, so impossible to hold inside a single mind, that they pressed it into stone so it would remain there when they were gone. And the hand prints. The hand outlines found across dozens of cave sites are among the most emotionally immediate images in the entire human record. A human being pressed their hand against the wall. They blew pigment around it, and they left a record of themselves that has lasted 40,000 years. Researchers including Will Robrooks at Leiden University have studied these hand stencils extensively. What they found is that the hands include women, men, children, and elderly individuals. This was not a specialist activity. This was something humans across an entire community participated in. The hand on the wall says something very specific. It says I was here. It says I existed. It says the stone now knows the shape of my hand and will hold that knowledge after I am gone. This impulse is not ancient. It is not something humans used to feel and no longer do. You feel it. Every photograph you have ever taken of something beautiful was a version of that same gesture. Every social media post in which you documented a moment rather than simply living it. Every time you needed to write something down so you would not forget, or tell someone about an experience so it would feel more real, you were doing what those humans did. You were pressing your experience into a surface so it would persist. But the caves add another dimension that modern neuroscience has only recently begun to appreciate. The locations of the paintings were not chosen randomly. In a landmark study published in 2015, researchers Stephen Waller and Igor Reznikov analyzed the acoustic properties of cave painting sites and found a striking pattern. The most densely painted sections of caves consistently corresponded to the spots with the most powerful acoustic resonance. The places where sound bounced and amplified and seemed to come from everywhere at once. The places where, in the dark, with fire flickering and drums sounding, the walls themselves seemed to be alive. In altered states, in those resonant chambers, with the sound filling every corner, the painted animals on the walls would have appeared to breathe, to move. The flickering light on the uneven stone surface created an animation effect that modern researchers have documented and replicated. These were not still images. In the context in which they were experienced, they were living presences. The ancient humans who crawled into those chambers were not doing something naive or primitive. They were engineering an experience. They were designing an environment in which the boundary between the inner world of vision and the outer world of stone dissolved. They were building, tens of thousands of years before the concept existed, something that functioned like a cinema, like a temple, like a therapy room. A place where the things that lived inside you could be made visible on the outside. Researchers including Ian McGilchrist, whose work on the divided brain has reshaped our understanding of human consciousness, argue that this kind of image-making is not a secondary human activity. It is not what humans do after they have solved the survival problems. It is part of how humans survive. The act of giving form to overwhelming experience, of pressing it outside yourself and onto a surface where you can look at it, is a fundamental nervous system function. It is how humans process what is too large to carry alone. The bison on the wall of Chauvet Cave was painted 36,000 years ago. The person who painted it is gone. The culture is gone. The language is gone. The specific beliefs and rituals that surrounded the making of that image are almost entirely lost. But the impulse that drove the painter to that cave wall, the need to take something enormous and interior and make it visible and exterior, that impulse is intact in you. Every time you feel something you cannot fully name and reach for a way to express it, you are reaching for the same thing that ancient human reached for when they mixed charcoal and ochre and fat and pressed them into stone. You are still drawing on the cave wall. The surface has changed. The impulse never did.